So that was a little bit of Buddy Guy with a lineup including Jack Bruce and Buddy Miles, and that was a little bit of Mary Had a Little Lamb. It's actually part of a medley, and that's our hats off to Buddy Guy. We want to welcome to the microphones live from the Heartland a good buddy and neighbor, Mick Dumke, who is with ProPublica Illinois, investigative reporter par excellence, and
a hell of a swimmer.
And a hell of a swimmer. Welcome, Mick. It's great
Thank
to
you.
see you
Good
again.
to see
Thanks
all
for
you.
getting up so early.
You just never know what's going to be part of your introduction.
I know, exactly.
Yeah.
So is this the year you think that newspaper endorsements might make a difference, given the way everyone seems to be on the fence? Early voting's way down so far.
Right. Well, that's I think definitely it seems a possibility. I think we've even talked before. I've talked with you guys on the show before, raising the question: does anybody care who the newspapers endorse at this point in time? Mm-hmm. The answer is yes. Some people definitely do care, and in this instance, I think you're right, Thom. Your question, what you're suggesting, I think it could play an outsized role because we have so many candidates in the mayor's race, and they're all, if the polls are to be believed, which is a whole question mark there, but let's just say that the polls are on the money. There's so many candidates clustered within just a couple percentage points, and that's all within the margin of error.
Yeah.
So when the Sun-Times puts Lori Lightfoot on the front page and says this is our choice for mayor, at the very least, I think that gets the attention of people. Even if you're just walking by the guy in the corner selling the Sun-Times downtown and you see that, I think it has to get some people's attention. So wouldn't you rather be the person who gets the endorsement than not? I mean,
Sure.
we can say that at the very least, right?
Yeah. But, when we had Lori on the show some month or so back, a couple months maybe, she was so clear and she was so thoughtful. And what I think is missing from this horde of candidates is the chance to have thoughtful responses from people. I mean, these forums don't do it, especially if you've got 14 people at a table. How are voters, do you think, going to make this decision? Or do you think people will vote with their feet?
Well, I think it's really difficult. And in some ways, I'm sympathetic to the candidates because there are so many of them. How do you get your message out?
Right.
How do you cut through just the daily barrage of headlines? Just even locally, of course, people who are tuned into politics, we've been consumed by the scandal of the day. And so it's almost like the mayor's race has, the whole direction of the mayor's race has been shaped to this point by what's happened with, starting with the federal investigation, the charges announced against Ed Burke. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really difficult. And the other thing is, secondly, political campaigns at every level now, from president on down to your local alderman, they're all so scripted. I mean, it's very rare for candidates to go and be candid. There's a perception there's a greater risk to being candid and to just going out there and talking straight without your notes, without your talking points. And so I think that there's a sameness that seems to descend into almost every campaign, even this mayoral campaign with all these candidates, a wide open seat for the first time in my lifetime, and maybe the first time in your lifetimes too. Like, we really don't know who the next mayor is going to be. Yet, you're right. Each one of these forums, the candidates basically respond to the same questions the same way.
Yeah.
And a lot of their answers are actually pretty similar,
they
even though there are big differences between the candidates policy-wise and personality-wise in a lot of instances. But there's just a sameness that descends into all this.
And differences in their history, too.
Right.
Can I just ask, what do you think are two or maybe three of the pressing issues that should be being talked about? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But for our city, what are the three most pressing issues to you, Mick?
Well, I think that the most pressing issues to me, and I think to a lot of other voters, I'm not necessarily putting them 1, 2, 3, but are the city's precarious financial situation. There's roughly a $1 billion pension balloon payment that's due later this year, and I don't think we've heard adequate answers from any of the candidates about how they're going to deal with that. That's going to be one of the first things, whoever the next mayor is, it's one of the first things he or she is going to have to deal with, is how to come up with $1 billion on top of the money we're already paying to deal with the pension problem. Obviously, I think the situation, I'll call it just a criminal justice network here, ranging from so many complicated issues, ranging from police accountability to public safety in our blocks and our neighborhoods, to who's locked up, who's getting convicted, who's not, what's the right time to let someone out, how do you help people once they're out. We have neighborhoods in the city that some of them, an astronomical percentage of people are
In the system.
coming out of trying to leave prison and start new lives. Are we prepared in any way to help them? And then the third issue I would put up there, which I don't think has been talked about enough, is the city's growth plan. I mean, we're shrinking in population and economic development. The tax base is shrinking. This is particularly acute in longtime black neighborhoods. The black middle class in this city has been shrinking, which I think a lot of white Northsiders are not aware of.
I'm totally concerned.
The neighborhoods on the south side and the nuances of the neighborhoods on the south side. Of course, there are middle class people all over the south and west side, but those communities are increasingly imperiled from disinvestment and even the belt tightening that's happened at public sector agencies. The city, Cook County government have slashed hundreds of jobs over the last decade. Maybe it's in the thousands now. And a big chunk of these jobs, were former teachers, teachers' aides, bus drivers, sanitation department workers who were sort of the bedrock of a lot of middle-class, working-class communities around the city. And I think it's really hit African-American neighborhoods particularly hard. And I just haven't heard a lot from the candidates about what is your plan to deal with that.
That third point in particular, Mick, is really well made, because it's hard to get into some of those issues without really getting into the weeds. So you end up saying yes or no to Lincoln Yards. TIF.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that becomes the sort of straw man for a whole bunch of other stuff that relates to so many other issues, including how many school classrooms should we have, and whatnot. But I also think there's probably something else going on behind the scenes. More and more candidates have opposition research, and I'm wondering how many tips you're getting from candidates, even if they're all sounding kind of the same in forms. Is there stuff going on behind the scenes to try to distinguish between one candidate and another? I mean, we're getting all sorts of established politicians are getting a lot of bad news these days
Absolutely.
about their
Yeah.
past record, and it just seems to pile up every week. We get another story. It's not just Burke, but also Solis, and this week Marino, and then you have side stories like Munoz. Are you getting tips from opponents to incumbents who want to make sure the dirt gets out there?
And
Well,
can
I-
you reveal it?
I wouldn't reveal the specific tips if I were getting them, but I'll be honest with you guys. I don't get a lot of those tips. I don't cover the day-to-day, the play-by-play stuff. It's actually a strange feeling for me after years when I was at the Reader,
Right.
and there were only a couple of us doing politics news stuff. We did everything. So we would do, there you go, Reader. Katie's holding up a Reader mug here. Well done. But,
Really old.
Ben Jarofsky and I would, Ben would do his column, I would do deep dive stories, and then at election time, we would switch over to basically covering the elections
Yeah, and you
in,
did it
in
really
Reader
well.
style. Appreciate that. But now I'm at a place where we're just doing investigative reporting, so it's actually part of our mission is to stay focused on kind of our longer term stuff. So it's a weird feeling, you guys. This election is going on. I'm certainly following it. I'm interested. There are candidates connected to stories I'm working on, but I'm not following the play-by-play. So that's the first answer to your question. I'm not getting a lot of those kind of tips. They wouldn't come to me. But I do think that behind that question, there's a bigger issue here that a lot of people are wrestling with. And the aforementioned Ben Jarofsky, the great columnist for the Reader, he and I have a live talk show As I was saying to you guys before the show, I don't know how you guys do it every week. We do our talk show once a month at the Hideout, and even that is like we're always scrambling to pull it together. So kudos to you guys doing it every week.
There's three of us.
And a special
Still.
thank you for coming today with not a lot of notice.
Well, what I was going to say is you're totally welcome. I love you guys. I love being here. But, we were talking the other night about how there's this sort of fundamental question, I think, in this race. Do you want someone with experience, which right now, if you have experience, that means you probably were connected in some way, shape, or form. You worked in the administrations of either Rahm Emanuel or Richard Daley, because they were running the show for the last, 30 years.
Right.
Or do you want someone who's a fresh face who doesn't really have a lot of experience?
Right.
And it's great to have a fresh face, but aren't you a little concerned about someone who doesn't have the experience? Walking into City Hall.
Right.
So that's your choice. Someone who may be imperfect because of their associations, or someone who looks great, but frankly may have a really steep learning curve. I think that's one of the fundamental questions for voters this time around.
I think most voters are thinking exactly those thoughts. And I think it's also the danger there is that voters will just go in and go, oh, there's a Daley, or oh, there's a Preckwinkle. They run things. They know how to run things, and let's just give it back to them. Where a number of people across the city are thinking, let's send a new city council to City Hall. Let's send a new mayor and let them figure it out together. How likely is that scenario?
Well,
do you
there's
think?
50 aldermen, and I don't remember the exact number, but at least 47 of them, somewhere around there,
Face
90% or more have opposition.
That's right.
So there's a handful who don't have opposition. But so you've got dozens of aldermanic candidates, and there's likely to be some turnover, but I also have to say that each of the last couple of election cycles, I remember all of us talking about, is this the time where the city council has a huge turnover and really changes? And institutions change really slowly. I think if you look at the city council over the last 12 years, especially from kind of the last term of Mayor Daley through the 2 terms of Mayor Emanuel, the argument has been made to me, and I buy it, that the city council is slowly changing. The definition of an alderman has changed. Traditionally, aldermen, of course, were, as the alderman of this area, the former alderman, why can't I think of his name? Bert Nateras. Bert Nateras.
used to live right up the block.
Right, and he famously said, "I'm a janitor. My job is to take care of all the little stuff here."
Right.
That's always been the job of an alderman. But now you've got a lot of aldermen, starting with people like Scott Wagasback, who are sort of policy wonks. That's the main thing that they are known for and interested in.
Right.
And so I think you're seeing more and more people like that. Amaya Pawar, who is running for treasurer, city treasurer, has tried to be out in front on policy ideas and whatnot. So I guess my hope for the good of the city is that while everyone still wants their neighborhood service delivery and they want to have somebody to call if they have an issue, I also hope that we do continue to have an upgrade in the quality of the legislative branch and the policy thinking from our aldermen. That's what my hope is.
I think one of the unspoken issues is how few people vote in these winter February primaries. And that's something else I'll be watching, is to see whether there's any shift upwards in the kind of turnout, to the extent that there are intriguing local aldermanic races that might turn people out, or if one of these mayoral candidates takes off and begins to really excite people. I think that's part of the issue, is that none of these folks are really exciting the electorate at this point, who perhaps until a week ago were still paying attention to the holidays and the Super Bowl.
Well, Amara is one of the candidates who does have a little excitement following her, and it's mostly young people, and it's mostly young progressives, young politically involved people. And I don't know that will save her from her bad publicity of last week about finances, but there's somebody who falls into the category of I don't think she knows how to run a city.
Well, that's the issue there, and I think a lot of even some of her supporters I've seen on social media, for instance, questioning her decision to accept and tout Dorothy Brown's endorsement. I mean, Dorothy Brown, the clerk of the circuit court, who reportedly has been under federal investigation herself, never charged with anything. Let's be clear about that, but is widely viewed by people who follow politics around here as someone running a patronage operation,
Totally.
not the most progressive political figure here. And so to have Amara Enya, who has made a name for herself as being an energetic, young, really smart, progressive candidate, then to turn around and align yourself openly and happily with this member of the old guard, I think that's taken a lot of people aback and
Yeah.
said, even if your policies are progressive, what does this say about your sort of political naivete?
Do you think Willie Wilson will attract his 10 or 12% that he's gotten before?
He's certainly got a following. I mean, Willie Wilson, what a fascinating character here. And of course, people are aware of the fact that he has literally given out cash on a number of occasions at various gatherings or at church services and whatnot. There is always going to be a portion of the electorate, as we know right now, given who our president is, who's fascinated with wealthy people because they look up to the fact that they are wealthy. And, who doesn't somewhere within themselves want to have more money? I mean, let's just be honest about it. So there's always a portion of the electorate who equates someone who's wealthy with success, and they look up to that. So I wouldn't write him off.
I watched him in that debate the other night. I really couldn't understand where he was going on any of these questions. I mean, what he was addressing. It was very confusing.
Well, he hasn't been educated conventionally, and so especially for a lot of people from, let's just be honest about outside the black community, it's sometimes hard to pick up everything he's saying. But you can't mistake that for his what I would sort of call his common touch.
Yeah,
and
good point.
again, this success story that a lot of people really find appealing.
Uplifting.
Yeah.
Is
That's
Gary
right.
Chico surging, as his campaign claims?
Say no. Say no. Please say
I
no.
don't know. I mean, listen, again, the professional pollsters are having a hard time with this one, let alone those of us sitting at a microphone here speculating. I mean, the thing about Gary is he is qualified, and he's actually a very likable, charming person.
Mm-hmm.
He also, was essentially endorsed by Ed Burke soon before Ed Burke's latest rounds of trouble. And I think Gary is now saying it wasn't a formal endorsement, but I think they appeared at a press conference
Yep.
together
Yes,
and
they
everything.
did.
And certainly he's a longtime friend and ally of Ed Burke. So I think that's going to be problematic for him. It has been. But again, you guys, with all the people in the race, you may get 15% and be in the runoff.
I know.
So it's this is one of those things where I think it's just going to be crazy election night. The first round of election night on February 26th, we're all going to be just watching the results, saying who's going to eke in there, who's not. It may not even be decided that night who makes the runoff. Who knows?
What's scary to me is that you'd get Daley and
Mendoza.
And Mendoza, she's coming off like she's a progressive, and I remember when she
She's
was
friends with all the guys
with the
who are
Hispanic
in bad
Democratic
trouble.
Organization and ousting Chewy in the old days.
Yeah, I'll say
Yeah.
two things about Susanna. First of all, again, a very likable person.
Good soccer player.
A good soccer player.
Clearly.
She's made it clear. She was a college soccer player, so she
Has
was
to be
definitely
good.
a good athlete and made that a point of some of her commercials. So the interesting thing about Susanna is, yes, you're absolutely right. I think the very first time she ran on her own and got defeated. She aligned herself with various political forces at the time. We all know the story now. She's been an insider for a long time, allies of Mike Madigan, got married at Ed Burke's home, which is another one you're always like, really, you got married at him? Now you're trying to distance yourself. But the other hand, as I've talked about with other people, there are lots of individuals in Chicago political history and national political history who started off in the local machine and then end up being very independent-minded and able politicians, whether you're talking about Harry Truman or the much-beloved Harold Washington, who started off on the inside and then evolve to become their own people. Is she at that point? That's for voters to decide. But I think it's both. I think we both have to keep pointing out where she came from and how she got here, but we also have to listen to where she says she is now. I think that's only fair.
So what I hear on a lot of these mayoral forums is everyone is assuming we're going to get a Chicago casino, that's going to pay for some of our problems. And as someone pointed out on our way down here, some of our former leaders or elected officials are collecting as much as $400,000 a year in pensions. Is that Richie Daley's take?
Yeah, that's what he
for
gets.
3 different dips into the public trough. I'm sorry, I live on Social Security. Can these guys manage to live on, I don't know, $100,000 a year? 200, maybe 150.
Well, apparently
do I hear
not.
125? Come on.
Aldermen make what 120,000 or more,
Those poor babies.
and we still have them who are allegedly taking bribes and whatnot. So, I guess it's wherever you are on the scale, you're always
Looking
looking
for
to move
more.
up. Yeah.
So are we going to get casinos, and do we want them?
I do, but you don't.
No. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Well, you
Mick?
know, my colleague, couple of my colleagues, Jason Grotto and Sonia, have recently done, and I will massacre her last name, so I won't try to tell you her last name, but they have recently done an amazing piece of reporting about gambling in Illinois and how we now have more places to gamble than in Illinois than Nevada does.
Jeepers.
That's because of all
Video
the
poker.
yeah, exactly. And so there's efforts to expand that. There's efforts to allow sports gambling, and then there's the Chicago casino thing. So what we're seeing over and over with all this, and with the legalization of marijuana, by the way, which many in this room might support.
Only if it doesn't get in the hands of the people who run everything already.
Well, that's one issue, and then the other issue is like to look at these as a panacea for these huge
Right.
bills we have
Right.
coming due. I think is a real mistake. I mean,
Right.
if we look at marijuana, there are many arguments in favor of legalizing it, but to look at it as this revenue stream we can dip into for everything is a real mistake. That's the wrong reason to
feels
do it.
like that.
I think it's a diminishing returns kind of issue here.
Yeah.
I mean, Gary's just announced a repositioning of their big casino to be closer to the interstate. You know why they're doing that, to attract more Chicago gamblers.
Right.
And it just seems to me that so-called progressive taxes are really sin taxes, and there's always issues, to my mind, with the state benefiting from the foibles of human nature. And I think there's only so many gambling dollars out there. And if the argument is to keep the Indiana dollars here or keep the suburban dollars going to River Casino inside the city, I guess I can go along with that. But I see so many negatives, including like the video poker thing.
Right.
It's only produced half the revenue they projected.
Right, and the state borrowed against anticipated revenues that didn't come to
Materialize.
fruition. Right, so now it actually got us deeper into debt. So
Yeah.
there are two different issues.
There's
this
something brilliant
Yeah,
to
was this a
look at.
sound policy idea, and then was it carried out correctly? But you're totally right, Tom. I think those are all valid questions, and to keep turning to these same revenue ideas over and over again is a mistake. But it's hard out there. Who's got fresh ideas?
Let's turn to baseball. The Super Bowl
Sweet.
is done.
Says the guy with the White Sox shirt
the
on.
Bulls are on the ascendancy. We're sure, but baseball is on the horizon.
But pitchers and catchers about to
Yeah,
start
it's
reporting.
great.
God.
But actually, I think it was your wife wrote a piece in the Sun-Times,
Right.
about being a Muslim and also being a family ticket holder with the Cubs, and we have the Ricketts family coming out saying some pretty negative things. Your thoughts and take?
Well, first of all, anyone who's interested should. I'll shamelessly promote my wife in
Right
the
on.
column.
Please.
But I
Where
do
do they
think
find it? Where do they find it?
it's you can. Her first name is Romana, and it ran on the front page of the Sun-Times a couple days ago. But you can find it online. It's just type Muslim Ricketts Cubs fan. I think you'll
Two
find
clicks,
it.
you get it.
Yeah. But I think what she I think she articulated, and others in my family have articulated. There are Muslims on both sides of my family, and we're all diehard Cub fans. On my particular wing of the family, we're fourth generation. Ramana's side of the family, her parents came here right before she was born from India. So the Cub fandom doesn't go back quite as long, but they have been season ticket holders for 15 years. And just to remind everybody, there were some lean years in those 15 years. Okay?
Yeah, I wasn't paying attention. I'm a Sox fan, but I'm sorry for all those lean years.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
And I think you're right. There's a separation. People want to do sports when they do sports.
It's supposed to be fun.
They don't want to do politics. They just want to go out and cheer for their team. So those of us who have the nasty habit of reminding them...
There's a lot of politics in sports.
Yeah, I
There's
know.
a
I
lot
like
of
to
politics.
mix it up.
But yeah, it is nice to go out to the park and just enjoy the game. I'm one of those people who actually keeps score on the old
I love
scorecards.
that.
I love that, yeah.
doing
With
that.
the pencil and everything.
But you get stuff like this, and it's not the first time that Papa Ricketts, as a lot of people call him, Joe Ricketts, the patriarch of the family, has said or done something deeply offensive to many people.
To the masses.
So this just keeps causing, and other people who are fans of other sports franchises, most of the people who own this are wealthy individuals, mostly guys, many of them disconnected from the way the rest of us live. So I think it goes over and over again. People who are music fans, if you at one time liked R. Kelly, or if you like someone else who's done something who just you find disgraceful in the era of Me Too or whatever else, we're constantly having to think the things we enjoy for our entertainment and our arts and our sports. Where is the line? Where do we draw the line? I mean, should I not go to Wrigley Field anymore this year? Should I not support this team? And then the Sox fans in this room would probably say yes. But
No, I like
No,
going
no.
to. I like.
and
like
I do
both
too.
teams.
I
Yeah.
go to both parks. I just love baseball. But the point is, like, okay, we could do that. We can make ourselves feel better. Is it going to have any practical impact? Probably not.
Right.
Does that matter? Should we just do it because it's right? I don't know. And what line do we draw? Someone said to me yesterday, if you start boycotting every single thing that's owned by someone who does something offensive to you, you can't walk down the street
You're
anymore.
basically
Yeah,
in
good
your
point.
house for the rest of your life, not eating, not
Right.
watching TV,
Without
not
using your
going
iPhone.
anywhere.
Right.
Built by slave labor in
which
China.
doesn't mean we just go into sort of a moral or ethical void either. I mean, so I guess the point is that this is something that we're all wrestling with. My wife Romana wrestled with it kind of openly in this column, which I think a lot of people connected with because the line of the column I think was basically like for some people in America, bigotry like baseball is a national pastime,
Oh.
and
Wow.
just something you have to
that.
ponder. a
All
little
right.
So just a quick word on what you're working on in your day job these days. I know you can't reveal
that. Yeah.
investigative reports, but this gang database that you've spent some time on, you had an update on this week. Is there anything else we
That's
should know
right.
about?
Yeah, I'm going to continue to report on civil liberties, open government, FOIA stuff. That's been a passion of mine for a long
Thank
time.
you
I'm
for
going to
that.
keep staying on it. It's funny. A lot of people don't read these stories. They're not exactly high traffic stories when you write about the intricacies, get in the weeds with like the Freedom of Information Act, or even the weeds of the gang database. But I think it's really important. So I'm going to stay on that. And I've got some more politics, city hall stuff coming as well.
You know, in an era where journalism's future is always up in the air, I'm really amazed at the impact of the Chicago Reporter alumni, even this week. Maria worked on a story about the Great Lakes Basin and how much more water is costing us. Angela's been working on the Georgia suppression of voters.
Right.
And so it's an amazing crew that's out there with Fernando Diaz back in town as an editor. I'm looking to see that next generation of Chicago Reporter
Many
reporters.
proud reporter alums. They're still doing great work, by the way. Yeah, and many proud reporter alums. I'm one. Ben Jarofsky's one. Laura Washington, of course, was my first editor there. Alden Lowry, who is Maria Zamudio's editor at WBEZ, is heading up their team on community and census, neighborhood kind of stuff. So yeah, we're all out there trying to carry on the tradition of looking at inequities and documenting what we need to do next.
Thanks
Mick
for coming on.
Dumke.
Hey, thanks
Thank
for
you
having
so
me.
much,
It's so
man.
great to see all of you.
It's great. It's always a pleasure to have you. Keep ProPublica aware of what's going on, and your investigative reporting is a real gift to us all. Thank you.
Thanks
And
so
you are
much.
listening to WLUW Chicago Sound Alliance.
Yeah,